Her hand cracked across my cheek so hard the teacup slipped from my fingers and shattered on their marble floor. Her friend gasped, halfway through a bite of lemon tart. My son didn't move, not even a flinch. "I told you to stay out of my business," she hissed, loud enough for the walls to remember. I didn't say a word. I picked up my shawl, walked past the glass door, and closed it gently behind me. Some bruises don't show on skin, they show in silence. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always quiet. I used to laugh louder, walk lighter. I used to fill a house, not haunt. For 35 years, I taught English literature to high schoolers who'd rather be anywhere else. But I loved it. I could pull poetry out of stone-eyed teenagers just by asking the right questions. At home, I was even better. A full-time mother, a widow, and a woman determined to make sure her only son never felt the emptiness I did when my husband died. Daniel was barely 9 when I buried his father. He didn't cry at the funeral, just clung to my sorry and didn't. Let go for 2 days. He was my shadow for years. I would read to him every night, even long after he could read himself. I still remember the way he used to press his hand to my chest and say, "This is my home, Mama." That boy. He adored me. When he turned 30 and brought Sarah home, I was prepared to love her too. I even prayed about it. She was poised, educated, beautiful in the sharp-edged way of modern women, designer bag, minimalist smiles, red nails that never chipped. I'll admit, I felt a little old around her, like the kind of woman who still folds plastic bags and uses biscuit tins for sewing supplies. But I told myself that love is enough, that if I opened my arms, she'd walk into them eventually. At first, things were fine. She called me Mummyji and even offered to help with the dishes once. They got married within the year, a big affair with silver elephants and catered sushi. My son looked radiant, she looked victorious, and I felt like I was handing over a sacred book I'd kept wrapped in velvet for decades. But I smiled, I clapped. I meant it when I whispered in her ear, "Take care of my boy." After the wedding, Daniel suggested they move into the family home. Our home, the one my husband and I had bought with government savings and patience. "We can renovate it, Mama," he said. "You can stay with us, in the in-law suite. It'll be perfect." I wanted him to have his dreams, so I agreed. I even transferred the house title to both their names, joint ownership. Not because they asked, but because I believed love deserved trust. The first month was warm. We cooked together, shared coffee in the garden. I remember Sarah showing me Pinterest boards for the living room. She didn't ask my opinion, but I told her, "Lovely, Beta." She smiled without looking up. Then came the slow shifts. My saris didn't match the new aesthetic. My cooking was too heavy. My presence at the dinner table made her feel watched. Daniel started working longer hours, and Sarah began claiming more space, literally. First the living room, then the garden, then the kitchen. Within 6 months, I was moved to the back room with a side entrance. I told myself it was temporary, that young couples need space, that maybe if I made things easier, she'd soften. I started eating earlier, cleaning up quietly, pretending not to hear when she told her friends I was a bit much. But the real heartbreak wasn't Sarah. It was Daniel's silence. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped noticing when I limped after climbing stairs. He stopped calling me Ma, started calling me Mum, like Sarah did, as if even my name didn't belong in their house anymore. One evening, I left a bowl of dal outside their door after she said she was too tired to cook. He texted me later, "Please don't overstep." She felt pressured. Overstep. That word stayed in my chest like a nail, and yet I stayed. Because mothers don't give up. Because I thought maybe, with time, I'd matter again. I helped with laundry. I babysat their dog when they traveled. I watered the plants Sarah forgot about. I picked up her dry cleaning. I smiled when they took anniversary pictures on the porch I once painted, until the day I knocked on her door, holding a tray of tea, and she slapped me in front of her friend. I don't remember what I said to provoke it. Maybe I offered advice. Maybe I breathed too loudly. Doesn't matter. What matters is this. She hit me, and he watched. I raised a man who once called my heartbeat his home, and now he watched it break without blinking. When you give someone everything, you don't expect a receipt. You expect remembrance. After their wedding, Daniel and Sarah insisted I remain in the house, but in a separate space. It was Sarah's idea to remodel the downstairs den into an in-law suite, complete with its own entrance, kitchenette, and bathroom. She pitched it like a luxury. Your own space, Mummy G, privacy, independence, you'll love it. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Thank you." But independence felt a lot like exile. At first, I tried to make that little space mine. I brought in my lace curtains, my brass oil lamp, a shelf of old poetry books. I folded towels the way I always had, tight, rectangular, and warm. I told myself that this was still my home, that my footsteps still belonged in these halls. But slowly, they stopped including me in decisions. Paint colors, holiday plans, even birthdays. I learned about Sarah's pregnancy not from Daniel, but from overhearing a phone call while washing dishes. "We're telling everyone this weekend," she had said, laughing. God, I hope his mother doesn't cry. I didn't. I just folded my hands in prayer that night and placed a sweet in front of my husband's photograph. "You're going to be a grandfather," I whispered. "Maybe now they'll see me again." During the pregnancy, I tried to help, offering homemade soups, warm compresses, advice passed down from my mother and hers. But Sarah didn't want it. "I've got an app, thanks," she would say, brushing past me like I was a maid with too many opinions. Once, she told Daniel that my old wives' tales were stressing her out. He repeated it to me word for word. "Let her breathe, Ma." So I stopped. I cooked only for myself. I stopped suggesting, stopped offering, and somehow that was worse. Because then they accused me of being distant, cold, ungrateful. For what? I gave them a mortgage-free home, decades of savings, and my son's entire childhood wrapped in gentleness. But I became a ghost in my own story. When the baby arrived, I allowed myself to hope again. A granddaughter. The next chapter. I bought her a small gold bangle with my initials engraved inside. I stitched a quilt. I lit candles. I waited for the moment Sarah would hand her to me and say, "Here, Mummy G, she needs you." That moment never came. Instead, I was handed a list. Feeding rules, sanitizing rules, nap schedule, no perfume, no old remedies. The last line read, "Please respect boundaries." She may as well have written, "You're not her mother." So I obeyed. I visited when invited, held the baby for 10 minutes at a time, and handed her back like a borrowed item. Daniel said, "Little." He was always busy, I understood. Work, stress, baby. But I also saw how he looked at Sarah now, with the quiet obedience of a man afraid of choosing wrong. I tried to tell myself they were just navigating marriage, parenthood. That it wasn't personal, that all daughters-in-law need time to adjust. But then came the social gatherings. Sarah began throwing little brunches and tea parties, neighborhood women with matching shoes and filtered smiles. I was never invited, only asked to not come. Upstairs between noon and 2? Once, I forgot and came up to return a parcel. Her friend, sipping tea in a designer caftan, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, Sarah, I didn't know the maid stayed on site." I laughed politely. Sarah didn't. Correct her, she didn't even flinch. That night, I lay awake on my small bed, staring at the ceiling I once painted with Daniel's initials. I realized then, I hadn't lost a daughter-in-law. I had lost my place. The house no longer smelled like sandalwood and cumin. It smelled like vanilla candles and imported detergent. The walls no longer echoed with our Sunday bhajans, now only the hum of Sarah's playlists. My garden, once filled with tulsi and marigolds, had been uprooted and replaced with sterile white stones and plastic orchids. And the worst part? I let it happen. Because I loved my son. Because I didn't want to be a burden. Because I believed in patience, in quiet sacrifices, in waiting for people to come around. But people don't come around when you make it too easy to walk over you. I kept telling myself it would get better, but the truth was, I wasn't family. I was furniture, useful, quiet, invisible. Until that slap, I still hoped things would turn around. I believed, foolishly, that respect could be earned if you just kept giving. But that day, she hit me in front of someone else. Not behind closed doors, not in a moment of panic. In public, deliberate, unapologetic, and my son, my Daniel, looked down at the floor like it was easier than looking at his mother. That day didn't break me. It confirmed what I'd refused to see. I wasn't a mother-in-law to her. I was just an old woman she hadn't yet managed to evict. I stopped using the upstairs kitchen after that day. Sarah didn't tell me to. She didn't have to. She made it known through glances, sighs, locked drawers, rearranged utensils, and conversations held just loud enough to sting. So I adjusted. Again. I began preparing my meals downstairs on the tiny single-burner stove I'd once bought just for emergencies. I kept my dishes to one side. I stopped taking up space. You'd be surprised how quickly a house can become a cage when the people inside treat you like clutter. The guest bathroom upstairs, the one I'd used for decades, suddenly had a lock I didn't have the key to. My chai masala, which I kept in a small steel tin on the top shelf, disappeared. When I asked Daniel, he just sighed. Maybe you misplaced it. I didn't. Then came the evening Sarah hosted her networking group, an assembly of women with expensive handbags and loud, hollow laughter. I wasn't informed. I had just returned from a temple visit and made the mistake of walking through the foyer to retrieve a parcel. I heard her say it before I saw her. Loud, clear, cruel. Honestly, it's like living with a shadow. Always lurking, always watching. I can't even breathe in my own house. I froze behind the pillar. One of the women replied, chuckling, "Can't you just get her a nice retirement home?" Sarah laughed. "Soon, I hope." I stood there, invisible, holding a bag of incense sticks. I couldn't move. My legs betrayed me. My voice vanished. Daniel must have heard it too. He walked out of the study as I turned to leave. He saw me. He knew I had heard. He didn't say a word. That night, I didn't eat. But that wasn't the worst of it. One afternoon, I offered to watch the baby while they both stepped out. Just 2 hours. I missed her. Missed holding someone who didn't flinch. When I entered a room, Sarah agreed reluctantly. The baby cried for 20 minutes straight. I did everything I could, rocked her, sang lullabies I hadn't sung in years, even tried the stroller. She eventually slept, but not before my nerves frayed like old thread. When they returned, I explained everything. "She just needed rocking," I said gently. "Maybe she's teething?" Sarah's eyes went narrow. "She cried for 20 minutes?" "Yes," I said, carefully. "But she was distressed for 20 minutes?" Daniel stood behind her, watching. "I tried my best," I said, quietly. "She's okay now." Sarah didn't respond. That night, I found a note slipped under my door. "We've decided it's best if childcare is left to professionals. Please don't watch the baby unless explicitly asked." Signed. Cold. Like a legal document. After that, I stopped even looking at the child when she was carried past my door. The locks started changing next. First, the front gate code. Then, the kitchen pantry. I once asked Sarah if the new grocery cabinet key had been misplaced. "Oh," she said with a smile. "We've just reorganized things upstairs. Nothing you need. When I turned to leave, I heard her mutter, "She always needs something." Daniel? He played peacemaker when it was convenient, coward when it wasn't. His favorite phrase had become, "Just let it go, Ma." Let go of what? My place? My memories? My dignity? Once, when the Wi-Fi in my suite stopped working, I gently asked if someone could help reconnect it. Sarah didn't answer. Daniel texted, "Can you manage without it for a bit?" The password was changed. I never got it again. That night, I cried into a towel, not because I couldn't watch my serials, but because I couldn't remember the last time my son touched my hand. The humiliation wasn't in grand gestures. It came in small, sharp cuts, like when I was told not to hang my laundry outside because it looked untidy. Or when Sarah loudly asked Daniel at dinner, "Do we have to invite her to the anniversary lunch?" He didn't say no. He said nothing. I knew something inside me was changing, hardening. I began collecting receipts, little signs. I photographed notes, recorded whispers on my phone. I wrote everything down, dates, phrases, changes, not because I had a plan, but because I wanted to remember I wasn't crazy. But the final blow came on a morning that should have been peaceful, a small miscommunication, truly harmless. I'd ordered a spice delivery, and it accidentally went to the main door instead of my entrance. I knocked upstairs to retrieve it. Sarah opened the door, holding my parcel like it was radioactive. "I told you not to cross boundaries." "I just came for my—" She slapped it into my hands and hissed, "You're always in the way. Just stay out of my life." Then she closed the door in my face. Not slammed, just closed. That's what broke me. Not the slap, not the note. Not the food, the quiet closing of a door I once opened for her with love. I had given her my kitchen, my son, my silence, and now she was closing my face out of my own front door. What she didn't know was that I still held one key she hadn't taken. That night, after she closed the door in my face, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands. They looked old, wrinkled, but strong. The same hands that had cradled Daniel through every fever. The ones that fed him, clothed him, stitched his uniforms when we couldn't afford new ones. I used to press these hands to his forehead and say, "You are never alone." But I was. Entirely. I don't remember lying down, but I remember the dreams. Dreams of my husband, Arvind, standing in the garden. He had a towel draped over his shoulder, pruning the tulsi plant like he always used to. He looked up at me and said, "You're still there? They don't deserve your name on their lease, Mira." I woke up with a start, heart racing, the faint scent of his aftershave lingering in my mind. That was the first time I let myself consider the idea. What if I left? Not emotionally, physically, legally, permanently. But the thought felt like treason. To Daniel, to Arvind's memory, to the idea of a mother who never gives up. I pulled out my old metal trunk, the one with all my just-in-case things. Inside was a small red folder. It held every document I'd ever considered important. Among them, neatly folded and signed, in blue ink, was the gift deed from when I'd transferred the house over to Daniel and Sarah after the wedding. Except, it wasn't a full transfer. Not entirely. At Arvind's insistence before his death, we had added a clause, buried deep. Page 5, paragraph 8, that protected my beneficial ownership of the property. It had seemed unnecessary at the time. We had faith in our son, but Arvind had known how families could turn. I remembered his words that night. "Love them, but don't give away the floor under your feet, Mira. Not completely. Never completely." And suddenly, it wasn't just paper. It was armor. I sat there for a long time, the quiet ticking of the wall clock keeping time with my breath. That slap had been the final insult. But the real wound had come from years of being slowly erased, made small, convenient, quiet. I thought of all the times I had begged the universe to just give me peace, not justice, not even respect, just peace. And here, in my hand, was the only path I had left to it. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment at a legal aid office downtown. I wore my neatest beige sari, clipped my hair back, and carried every paper I had. The young woman behind the desk looked startled when I laid it all out in front of her. "You've kept everything," she said. "I've been keeping things longer. Then this country's had Wi-Fi," I replied. She smiled, but her smile turned serious as she read through the documents. "You still hold partial claim," she said. "Depending on how we approach it, you could file for partition or force sale. And if there's emotional abuse, you might even have grounds for a restraining order." Restraining order. That word made me flinch, not because I feared it, but because it meant accepting what had happened to me wasn't just unkind, it was legally wrong. On the ride home, I stared out the window as trees blurred past. I thought about what I was doing. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like rescue. That evening, I walked slowly back into the house. Sarah didn't look up from her phone when I passed. Daniel gave me a half nod from the hallway. The baby was crying upstairs. I paused for a moment. I had a fleeting thought. Maybe I should turn back, stay quiet, endure. Then I looked at the stairs I had once carried Daniel down when he had the measles. I remembered the prayer marks I used to draw in rice flour at the threshold each festival. The smell of Arvin's shaving cream in the master bath. The way Daniel used to wait for me at the gate every day after school. And I remembered what I saw now. Locked doors. Cold silences. My son's eyes vacant. My own reflection faded. I walked back down into my suite and opened my laptop. I began drafting the court papers that would reclaim my share of the home. No more asking. No more hoping I would take it back. Not just the property. Myself. I hadn't spoken to Arvind in years, but that night I lit a dia in front of his photo and whispered, "You were right. I gave them too much." His eyes in the photo smiled. Back. Have you ever trusted someone too much and paid the price for it? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. That night, I didn't cry. I wrote. I filed. And in the quietest voice I had, I began my war. The day I left, it didn't look like an escape. It looked like a visit. I packed 2 small bags, clothes, documents, a few photos of Arvind and Daniel as a boy, and told Sarah I'd be staying with my cousin Lotta for a few days to get some fresh air. She didn't ask why. She didn't even look up from her laptop. Daniel stood by the stairs, holding the baby. I waited for a word. Even one. "Ma, everything okay?" Nothing. So I walked out the same door I once carried him through after his first day of school, now just another exit. Lotta's home sat at the edge of a quiet colony on the outskirts of town, shaded with trees and always smelling of cardamom and jasmine. She welcomed me without question. Her hugs were firm, her tea was strong, her eyes kind. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, "and when you're ready, you tell me everything. Until then, just rest." That night, I slept more deeply than I had in years. No creaking footsteps, no muffled insults behind paper-thin walls, just a ceiling fan humming and the faint sound of Lotta's wind chimes. The next morning, I began the real work. I returned to the legal aid office, this time with Lotta beside me. The same young lawyer, Rima, smiled and welcomed us in. She had already begun drafting the documents, quietly, efficiently, respectfully. "Here's how we proceed," she said. "We file a legal notice asserting your beneficial interest in the property. You're within your rights to request either a buyout or a sale, If they don't respond or refuse, we escalate to civil court. I nodded. And Miraji, she added gently, if you want to include a claim of emotional mistreatment or elder abuse, I have resources. No, I said firmly. Not yet. I'm not looking to ruin them. I just want what is mine. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, that kind of restraint is rare. It's not restraint, I replied. It's dignity. The papers were drafted by the end of the week, 4 neatly stapled sets, each carrying my name in bold. When I signed the final page, a strange quiet filled my chest. Not fear, not anger, clarity. I had spent years asking for space, with whispers, with offerings, with patience. But now I would take it, and no one would slam the door in my face again. The next step was service, delivering the papers. Rima offered to send a courier, but I chose to hand them over myself. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted closure. I wore a soft gray cotton sari with a border Arvind had gifted me our last Diwali together. I pulled my hair back, added a dab of sandalwood on my wrists, and walked up the same driveway I had once watered every morning. Sarah opened the door. At first, she looked confused. Then wary, I handed her the envelope. What's this? She asked, frowning. Legal notice, I said calmly, requesting either full buyout of my share of the home or a sale to divide the proceeds. Her hand dropped slightly. This is a joke, right? I didn't answer. Just looked her in the eye for the first time in months. She stepped back. You're doing this now? At your age? I nodded. At my age, I've learned to stop waiting for respect that doesn't come. Daniel appeared at the hallway, holding the baby. His face went pale. Ma. I turned to him, not cruel, not cold. I left the door open for years, Beta. You closed it. This, I nodded toward the envelope, is just me finally locking it behind me. He didn't speak, and I didn't wait. I walked back down the driveway with slow, even steps. The sun was setting behind me, golden on the pavement. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and freedom. Back at Lotta's, she was waiting with 2 cups of tea and a plate of warm pakoras. You did it? She asked. I nodded, exhaling fully for the first time in what felt like years. I spent the next few days in a rhythm that felt foreign and healing. I read again. Poetry, stories, newspaper, columns. I went for short walks. I visited the temple. People smiled at me like I was still whole. Rima updated me daily. The papers had been received. No official response yet, but silence couldn't last long. Not when the law stood behind me now, and for once, I didn't feel like time was running out. I felt like time had returned to me. I wasn't sure where this would end, whether they'd buy me out or we'd go to court. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. Because I had already won. I had claimed the one thing no one else could sign away. My voice. I gave them the house. I gave them my silence. But now I'd given them something else. A deadline. She didn't come in person. Of course not. She sent an email. It was a performance, long paragraphs about how sorry she was if I ever felt excluded, how she never intended for tensions to rise, and how, as a mother myself now, she could begin to understand. But at the end of it came the real motive. Would I consider a private resolution? No court, no sale, just peace? She even offered a public apology, in front of neighbors, if that would help. I closed the laptop. She wasn't sorry. She was scared, not of losing me, but of losing face, of the neighborhood whispers, of legal consequences, of exposure, and I had no interest in her saving face with borrowed tears. My lawyer responded for me, kindly, firmly. The offer was simple. Buy me out at fair market value within 45 days, or the house would be sold publicly. No games, no grand speeches. Just process. Soon after, word began to spread. Not because I told anyone, but because people talk, especially in tight-knit colonies where fences are low and egos are tall. Neighbors began noticing Sarah's clipped tone, her quickened pace past friendly porches. Some even reached out to me, subtly, gently. "Hope you're okay, Miraji," one said, delivering fruit. "She never deserved your grace," said another, a retired principal I used to greet during evening walks. I didn't respond to gossip. I never have. But I did feel the shift. The woman who once dismissed me as just an old house fixture was now the subject of polite pity. She couldn't control the story anymore, and she hated that. Meanwhile, Daniel began texting. Small things, here and there. "Hope you're sleeping okay. Baby has your smile. Let me know if you need anything." I didn't respond right away, not out of cruelty, but out of caution, because this wasn't about forgiveness. This was about patterns, and patterns don't break overnight. But I did finally send one message: "I will always be your mother, but I will no longer be your cushion." He didn't reply for a full day. Then, "I understand." Back at Lotta's, I began to feel something unfamiliar. Not joy, not yet. But momentum. Breath returning to my lungs. My spine remembering what it meant to stand on its own. I started volunteering at a library, tutoring children in English. I unpacked old poems. I lit incense for no reason other than I wanted to. I began choosing myself again, and they scrambled. Sarah tried to rally sympathy, telling neighbors half-truths about family misunderstandings. Daniel became visibly withdrawn, his smile strained, his voice quieter at community events. They canceled the baby's first birthday party at the last minute. I wasn't invited anyway, but I wasn't waiting anymore. I had stopped looking through windows for someone to call me inside. Now I was building my own front door. They thought I would go quietly, that I would cry, retreat, beg. But I didn't. Crumble, I became the mirror, and what they saw in it terrified them. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, a cold one, sharp wind, gray sky, the kind of day where everything feels a little heavier. We met at a neutral office downtown, polished floors, beige walls, a water cooler that hummed too loud. I sat across from Daniel and Sarah, both of them stiff in their chairs like they were posing for a photo neither of them wanted taken. Sarah wore an expensive shawl and tight-lipped nerves. Daniel looked thinner than I remembered. Neither of them greeted me. That was fine. I hadn't come for pleasantries. Their lawyer began with pleasantries, of course. "We're hoping to resolve this amicably, given the family ties involved." That word, family, tasted sour now. My lawyer, Rima, nodded but didn't flinch. "My client is open to resolution, but not retreat." She laid out the offer again, a buyout of my share based on current market value, or the house goes to sale. Simple, fair, lawful. Sarah couldn't hold it anymore. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You want to rip apart your own son's life? Over what? Some hurt feelings?" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Rima did. "This isn't about feelings. It's about ownership, boundaries, and dignity." Sarah turned to Daniel, her voice sharp and shrill. "Say something." Daniel looked at me for a long time. And for the first time in years, I saw something other than avoidance in his eyes. I saw shame. "Mum," he began, voice low. "Can we talk outside?" I looked at Rima. She gave a soft nod. We stepped out into the hallway, under a flickering light. "I didn't think it would come to this," he said. "It didn't have to," I replied. He rubbed the back of his neck like he used to when he was caught lying as a boy. I was caught in the middle." I shook my head, firm but not cruel. "No, you chose the middle, over and over. You watched me be silenced, humiliated, isolated, and you did nothing." He looked down. "I don't hate you," I continued, "but I don't excuse you either." Then I added gently, And I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to fix me. He nodded slowly. We'll buy you out. I stepped back into the conference room with him. Sarah's face was a storm, but she said nothing. She knew. It was over. They signed the agreement within a week. I received the first bank transfer 10 days later, my rightful share of the home I had once given away in love. And just like that, the house became a transaction, a memory, a closing file. But closure doesn't come in courtrooms. It comes in the quiet. One afternoon, as I packed the last of my belongings into labeled boxes at Lotta's house, I came across a small envelope tucked into one of my poetry books. It was from Daniel. Handwritten inside was a single-page letter. Ma, I don't know when I stopped standing up for you. I think I told myself I was keeping the peace. But what I really did was keep you in pain. You deserve better than silence. You deserved a son with a spine. I can't undo it. But I want you to know, I see it now, and I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll let me visit, just as your son, not as a man hiding behind a wife or fear or anything else. With love, Daniel. Sat with that letter for a long time, not crying, just breathing. It wasn't a fix, it wasn't a ribbon on the mess, but it was a beginning, and that was enough. By the time the deal was finalized, I'd already found my new home, a modest cottage on the edge of a quiet lake, surrounded by peepal trees and soft light. A space that smelled like sandalwood and freedom. I didn't need much, a bed, a stove, my books, a few photos, and silence. But this time, silence I chose, not the kind forced upon me in narrow hallways and locked cupboards, the kind that comes after courage. A month later, I received one final message from Sarah. Just a line. You. Win? Happy now? I didn't reply, because it was never about winning. It was about waking up and remembering who I am, about looking in the mirror and seeing someone who said, enough, and meant it, about realizing that dignity isn't something you wait for. It's something you reclaim. They say mothers are meant to endure everything. I disagree. We are meant to love with everything, but not at the cost of our soul. I had spent years asking for a seat at the table. In the end, I built my own table, where no one would ever dare pull the chair out from under me again. The cottage wasn't grand, but it was mine. Every inch of it. 2 bedrooms, one for guests who might never come, and one for me. A kitchen with a wide window over the sink. A small veranda where the morning sun slid in like an old friend. And silence. Not the kind that used to punish me, but the kind that wrapped around my shoulders like a shawl, soft and earned. The first night I slept there, I didn't dream of the house I left. I dreamt of water, still, reflective, free. I woke to the sound of birds and not a single footstep overhead. I began forming new habits, simple ones. Morning walks to the temple around the corner. Fresh flowers in a brass vase near Arvin's photo. Volunteering twice a week at the local library, helping children read their first words. No longer silenced, I spoke with calm authority, not bitterness. Dignity had found its volume again. Some days were harder than others. The ache of what could have been still whispered from time to time. A breeze that passed through old rooms in my memory. But I reminded myself that grief doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you were brave enough to choose. Daniel called 2 weeks after. The sale was finalized. I let it ring the first time. The second time, I answered. His voice was soft. Careful. Hi, Ma. Hello, Beta. He asked if he could visit. Not with the baby, not with Sarah. Just him. I agreed. He came on a Sunday morning, carrying a box of sweets and a look I hadn't seen in years. Genuine, unsure, apologetic. He sat on my veranda, quiet for a long while. I thought I was doing the right thing, he finally said. I looked at him gently. You thought you were keeping the peace. But peace bought at the cost of someone else's silence isn't peace. Daniel, it's submission. He nodded, eyes glassy. I see that now. I see everything now. He asked if we could start over. I told him we could begin. Not from where we left off. That place no longer existed. But from where we were, two people trying to rebuild a thread of truth between them, we had tea. He helped me prune the garden. We didn't talk about Sarah. I didn't ask. Because forgiveness isn't a gift you owe someone. It's a door you open for yourself when you're ready. Meanwhile, Sarah had taken to painting herself as the victim in carefully curated social circles. I heard through neighbors how she claimed I blindsided her, how I never adjusted, how some people just love drama. I didn't respond. I had no need to. Because when you finally stand up, those who built their power on your knees will always cry foul. Let them. I wasn't living in her story anymore. The funds from the house sale gave me more than a home. They gave me agency. I started a small community group for senior women. We met once a week, drank tea, and shared stories no one else bothered to ask about. Women who'd been widowed, abandoned, dismissed. Women who had lived full lives but were treated like ghosts in their own families. We laughed louder than we cried. And every time a new member came in with tears in her eyes and years of silence behind her, I told her the same thing. You are not a burden. You are a beginning. On my granddaughter's second birthday, a card arrived. No return address. Just a child's handprint in paint and a scribbled name. Annika. I smiled, pressed it to my heart, and placed it on my fridge. I didn't expect more. I didn't need more. I had learned to love without leashing myself to pain. Sometimes I walk by, my old neighborhood, not out of longing, but reflection. The house looks the same from the outside, painted shutters, manicured lawn. But I no longer feel a pull toward it, because the real home I needed wasn't behind that gate. It was inside. Me, waiting for me to come back. If you had a second chance at peace, would you take it? Even if it meant walking away from your own blood? Let me know in the comments. I lost a house, a title, a false peace, but I found something far greater. My name, my voice, and a life. No one gets to silence again. People think the hardest part is walking away. It isn't. The hardest part is realizing no one ever truly saw you in the first place. That you gave love like oxygen, constant, invisible, essential, and yet were treated like stale air. Something tolerated, something to push aside. For years, I thought being a good mother meant sacrifice. That the quieter I became, the more peace I preserved. That endurance was proof of love. But silence doesn't keep families together. It only teaches others how to forget you without guilt. I look back now, not with anger, but with clarity. Every insult I swallowed, every door closed in my face, every meal eaten in solitude wasn't just about them. It was about what I allowed, hoping it would one day be returned as respect. But hoping is not the same as healing. Healing came the day I handed over those court papers with a calm hand and a steady heart. Not for revenge, not to embarrass them, but to tell the truth, on paper, in law, in full daylight. I exist, I matter, and I will not be diminished. I no longer live by their rhythms. I no longer wait to be invited to my own worth. Now, my life is small in size but vast in peace. In the quiet of my cottage, I've come to understand something deep. A mother's love should never be a currency to be spent and forgotten. It is a legacy, meant to be honored, not exploited. Daniel and I speak occasionally. He visits sometimes, always alone. We don't talk about the past, not because we've forgotten, but because we've both chosen not to bleed it out again and again. He brings me books now. Not apologies. That's enough. Sarah never reached out again. That too is a kind of closure. And my granddaughter, I don't know if she'll remember me. But one day, if she ever asks who I was, I hope Daniel tells her, she was the woman who taught me that strength can be quiet and still shake the ground beneath you. I've begun writing letters, not to send, just to release. To Arvind, thanking him for the wisdom he tucked into legal documents. To my younger self, reminding her she wasn't weak for staying too long, just hopeful. To other women like me, who believe love means staying invisible, it doesn't. Not anymore. If you're watching this and you feel like you're disappearing in your own home, I want you to hear this clearly, fully, from one heart to another. You are not being dramatic. You are not imagining it. And you are not too old to begin again. Sometimes I sit on my veranda in the evening, a warm shawl over my shoulders, a cup of cardamom tea in hand, and the sound of the lake in the distance. There's no applause. No one claps for you when you save yourself, but inside I feel it. The applause of every part of me that I thought I lost, now standing tall, whole, and finally at peace. Some silences are not surrender, they are signatures on a new life.